GM, and welcome to Moloch Traps, our latest podcast here at From A to Z. I'm Z-Fi, this is Zombie Shepherd, and we're excited to be bringing you this show in collaboration with BanklessDAO and its audiovisual team. To be clear, opinions in this series expressed by either of us are our own opinions and do not reflect the opinions of BanklessDAO at large. This week we will continue to study and discuss excerpts from the Meditations on Moloch essay written by Scott Alexander. The essay provides examples of multipolar traps, and it delves into various instances from history, biology, and economics to illustrate how competition often results in collective harm. In today's episode, we'll discuss the concept of government corruption. Let's start with Alexander's words on this example. I don't know of anyone who really thinks, in a principled way, that corporate welfare is a good idea. But the government still manages to spend somewhere around, depending on how you calculate it, $100 billion a year on it. Which, for example, is 3 times the amount they spend on healthcare for the needy. Everyone familiar with the problem has come up with the same easy solution. Just stop giving so much corporate welfare. So why doesn't it happen? Governments are competing against one another to get elected or promoted. And suppose part of optimizing for electability is optimizing campaign donations from corporations. Or maybe it isn't, but officials think it is. Officials who try to mess with corporate welfare may lose the support of corporations and be outcompeted by officials who promise to keep it intact. So, although from a God's eye view, everyone knows that eliminating corporate welfare is the best solution, each individual official's personal incentives push them to maintain it. As far as Congress goes specifically, only 9% of Americans like it, suggesting a lower approval rating than cockroaches, head lice, or traffic jams. However, 62% of people who know who their own congressional representative is approve of them. In theory, it should be really hard to have a democratically elected body that maintains a 9% approval rating for more than one election cycle. In practice, every representative's incentive is to appeal to his or her constituency while throwing the rest of the country under the bus, something at which they apparently succeed. From a God's eye view, every congressperson ought to think only of the good of the nation. But from within the system, you do what gets you elected. So it's a pretty messy landscape.
Definitely. And I mean, I got a couple things to say on this. For one, I don't know if it's just the way you read it or if this is the way it was written, but I want to say it's the way it was written. But man, this is so... Alexander's words are so snarky.
He's salty. Oh, yeah.
You know? There's definitely...
But it's necessary. When you get into these topics, it has to be there.
Like it should be really hard to have a democratically elected body that maintains a 9% approval rating for more than one election cycle. But
here we are.
Right? It seems like he's actually putting it out there even more plainly than people think about it. Like the way he's drawing upon specific percentages and things like that. He's not just snarky. He's he's pointing to the obvious. He's like, can't you see? We all see it. We all see it. But so that's something I just wanted to say. And the reason this is a multi-agent trap, the reason this is one of those flywheel things is because of the incentive alignment. You are aligned in every way to keep the system going if you are in one of those seats. And, obviously the obvious thing is because of self-gain. Self-interest would tell you, you take the money, you do what you have to do to keep taking the money and getting elected, you keep the power. It's a thing where we often think about politicians as individuals who go into this thing and are then drawn into a corrupt system that turns them corrupt because it's the only way to survive. And to a degree, I think that's true. But I think the part that really is true now more than ever, and it might have been one of these things that became truer. Like, I think it's one of these things that maybe it's always been true, but if it hasn't always been true, it's definitely been true since like the 1980s. And that is that politicians have become entities. They are corporations. They are brand names. And you
Hmm.
go into politics to sell your brand.
That makes a lot of sense. A lot of them have their own corporate donors or aligned institutions, think tanks, whatever the case might be. But it really is the individual politician as an extension of this corporate lobbying conglomerate. There's more lobbyists than there are representatives in Washington, D.C., if that tells you anything.
Right. And the thing is, like, it's not, I can go two ways with this. One, you can say that they're all self-interested brands in the sense of the business and investing part of it. Because if you are investing in things that you also have regulatory sway over, then you know which way the wind is blowing at all times, because both in the private and the public sector, you have both your hands in the pie and you're able to move your money and move your resources as need to be well positioned at no matter what's happening.
Right.
Bull and bear, you're making money.
Exactly. Because you know what the next move's going to be. You and a small group of people are in a closed door meeting deciding, yeah, we're going to go to war with whatever country we decide to go to war with next for money. So you just invest in those stocks ahead of time before the war gets announced, and boom, you're
You
rich.
know who's going to get the contracts. And it's also regulation when you know, like, you're going to go against some crypto thing, or you're going to go against some internet thing, or you're going to move against Facebook. You move your stocks accordingly. And we've seen this happen all over the place. There's many Twitter and Instagram channels devoted to tracking how politicians move their money and in accordance with their regulations. And then, so that's just one way to look at the branding thing. But the other way to look at it is that all of these people, when they get out of public, go into private, and their name is part of why they get these jobs. And then a lot of them can just go on to become speakers. All they have to do is talk at corporate events, and that's enough. So it is, politicians are the original influencers. Like, we hadn't used the word influencers until it became social media, but the reality is that's what politicians' games were. Be popular in the back end, doing whatever you have to do to whoever's greasing the wheels the most, but become a popular brand, become a popular name, and then be able to sell those services for the rest of your life, whether it be as a consultant, a speaker, or a CEO.
Right. And that's that revolving door policy we keep hearing a lot about. And it's a very great example of corruption. If you hold an elected position and then you leave that elected position to go work at the company that was paying you for your decisions while you were elected,
Or vice versa.
or vice versa, yeah, that or in a loop, that is
Like,
a to me that's a clear conflict of interest.
that's very much the Cheney thing. Like, Cheney was in the private first and got pulled in to be the vice president and basically just benefited all of his own companies and all of his own investments as one of the most powerful men in the country, you know? And I mean, there's all kinds of fingers you can point. I mean, we've got the current administration, we've got the previous administration, you know?
And we'll
And
have the next administration,
you know what
guaranteed.
else? This is a sidestep in the conversation, but it's worth mentioning. And we were going to mention it in another capacity anyway, so we might as well get into it now. And that's,
Sure.
I'm actually at this moment like afraid to point out specific names because I feel like it'll get us censored. And so, like, I feel like social media, like, if we were to talk about some of the events over the past year by name, whether it be like, certain ailments and, certain political people, like, the more you say these names, like, are you at the mercy of being banned for bringing these things up? Or is it the other way around where this is how you go viral is you say as many hot button names as you can in a space of time, you put them all in the title and then
It's probably both. You aim for virality and you either nail it or you get canceled. That's how it works.
Oh, okay, well but yeah, I'm more worried about, like, what I'm saying is more like the silencing from being shadow banned or having the algorithm, literally block certain subjects because they don't want you talking about these things on the YouTube.
I ran into a little bit of potentially suspicious, maybe censorship in prep for this episode. Searching, like, I was trying to get a good, concise list of some recent examples of blatant conflicts of interest. We hear about them in the news. We know they exist. We know Nancy Pelosi's making bajillions of dollars pre-trading stocks before she's making decisions. Like, we know all these things are happening. But I asked ChatGPT to give me a concise list, and boy, it was having a hard time. Can't seem to find any answers for you today. Sorry, I'm just an AI. It wouldn't give me any response. I'm going through, getting responses, ask for this question, and it just stalls. It just sat there looping. Gave me a blank response and asks, how is this response? Is this good so far? Thumb up or thumb down? And I couldn't interact with either button. So it's like, what's going on here?
Right.
Filters do I not know have just been applied.
Huh. Yeah, so it's obviously probably like some kind of ban on private information of political figures or something like that.
Or maybe it's just heightened scrutiny of what it searches for and what it presents for public figures. I don't
No,
know. There's something,
definitely.
it could have just been overload too, but it felt a little suspicious to just suddenly start giving me nothing on this spicy question.
So I guess that's a good point is this is a good time to say like within this context, do your own research. Like go not just with GPT or Bing or whatever, but go do your own searches on search engines to find out which politicians have been doing things like this. You can find a lot of examples. And the reason I say it's out there is because you see a lot of these videos by really good people on TikTok. There's a couple of people who really do a good job of deep diving into these like corruption things, and they have the receipts to prove it. So you can find this information out there. Might take a little bit of digging sometimes, but most of it's right on the surface because politicians accuse each other of doing it. So that's the other funny part is like slinging dirt is part of this whole political game. And so even though you're guilty of doing the thing, you'll point out that that person is guilty of doing the thing.
They did it first or they did it bigger, so don't worry about me.
Right. You know? But it's almost like, why would you give up the goose? Why would you tell people what's happening if you're all doing it? And it's like, because what are you going to do about it? That's really where the how do you have a 9% approval rating and you still exist? Like, because you're in power, because you have power that you're exercising. And this is not really a democracy. And that was my main note for this episode. The first thing I wrote in my
This
notes
is a great
is
transition here, yeah.
the whole system is fucked.
Yeah. Yeah, it perpetuates where it's part of this collection of races to the bottom that don't quite hit bottom. There's this perpetuation of fail at this just above the bottom level that everybody's making money and nobody's happy about it.
Right. And the reason I wanted to point out the branding part of this is because this is where a lot of people would say, yeah, government corruption is the end all be all of the entire thing. But here's the thing. Government, at least as far as I can tell, government only exists for the business class. Like the reason these brands, these are also business people. They're all personal brands doing business in politics. Government only exists to further the points of the politicians. It doesn't do a lot to help us as individuals. And we actually don't have sway over our elected officials anyway, not more than the super PACs and the corporate cronies and the lobbyists and the people who are able to get in their ears and in their pockets and offer them jobs and all these other things in the private sector. This exists regardless of the laws that are out there to prevent it. And so I don't want people to take away from this like, oh, we should be more corporate run. Corporations are, we should privatize everything, hyper libertarian. It's like the market will solve this. No, the market created this. Every politician is a participant in the market. That's why government corruption exists. It is a branch of the market. Now, am I saying government corruption wouldn't exist without markets? No. I'm saying that corruption in the hearts of people exists, period. You will always go for more. You will always go for self interest, at least
If
in the
it's
way
not
that,
money, it's power.
right. And at least that's the societies that we've been taught about. That's the way we've been taught everything has always existed. We can't dream of a better world in which people don't just seize power because they can. And that's kind of like the overarching thing with all of these situations. Like, why Moloch exists is because people will always take advantage. And so government corruption and capitalism and even Malthusian traps are all people taking advantage of someone else's inability to do anything about it.
It's even built into the system to a certain extent. This representing your constituents and doing what's best for your constituents at the expense of the everybody is its own race to the bottom, designed as part of the system.
Right. And what's racing to the bottom in this situation, the value, because that is one of these things, the multi-agent traps that come from race to the bottom afterwards. Like, there is still a race to the bottom there, but not in the capital way, not in the way that the thing is actually going to crash. What's being sacrificed are values that are able to be sacrificed.
Exactly. Whatever is a collective shared value of the whole country is being sacrificed to optimize for building a bridge to nowhere.
Well, the quality of, say, like literally our roads and our infrastructure, or our
Good
education
example.
and our health department, and all of these things have been sacrificed for more and more corporate profit. And the government is there telling us as citizens what we want to hear, but they're never delivering. They're never delivering on any of these promises because the promises that they made in the back rooms were the corporate interests. And that's really what keeps them in the big house. And the other thing is, it's kind of this idea that, like, if you as a politician, let's just pretend that you can be a poor person who becomes a politician, like an AOC
Well, this
type
would be
or
fun.
whatever. Like, um, because those kind of dream situations aren't everybody. Most
They're
politicians are
uncommon.
born rich. You know what I mean? They're already in some kind of situation where they can, like, from the beginning of their life, be almost groomed towards this thing. You're gonna be a CEO or a politician or a judge or whatever it's gonna be, and you got your spot because you're a part of the class. And
Because daddy already established a spot, and since you're here and share the same name, you're in.
which is also a big highlight of government corruption, the fact that you see, especially here in the South, I don't know how it is everywhere, but you see the same names coming. I mean, what am I saying? Yeah, you see the same names coming over and over. I'm sitting here acting like it doesn't happen everywhere. We had 2 Bush presidents, for Christ's
That's what I
sake.
was going to say. I didn't want to cut you off, but that should have been a really telling thing. Like, what are the odds that a father and a son both are the president out of however many 400 million people that are in this country?
And a husband and a
Seems a
wife.
little unusual. Yeah, right? Right? Like,
She wasn't the president, but she almost was.
yeah, those odds don't seem normal.
There's nothing democratic about our system. And it is, as we were talking about before the show, like, the idea of the US, people think about it as their individual citizens, but it was never made for you. The Constitution was written for white men that owned land. And read between the lines on that. That is the business class, because people didn't own land just to own it. They owned land to make money off of that land,
To farm it,
to farm it or to do some
build
kind
a
of business,
business.
do whatever. Like, you own land to capitalize upon that land, whether it be a cattle ranch or logging or whatever you were doing. You didn't own land just to enjoy it and have a good time on it. like
Right. You're not a conservative or a conservationist
right.
keeping it pristine for funsies. There's wood there that I want to sell.
Right. Or if you are keeping it pristine for funsies, it's so you can hunt on it.
Yeah.
But a lot of money goes into that every year. But no, but the point being that all of the documents written, the entire revolution, everything that was done to benefit the business class, people who already had vested interests in this country. It wasn't written for the citizens. So democracy isn't meant for you. It's never was. Like when you talk about your amendment rights and all these things, those were never really for you. They really weren't. And I guess the amendments you can argue are for us, but are they really? You know what I mean? They're really not helping us out when it comes to the whole health and prosperity thing. Like, even the way corporations work, everything is optimized for the shareholder. And the government is just another gigantic business at the end of the day. It's a business that's allowed to run at $1 trillion debt. It's allowed over, trillions and trillions of dollars in debt. And it's allowed to steal from its citizens at will. And when I say stealing, I'm not just talking about normal taxation. I'm talking about, like, whether taxation is even normal is arguable, but I'm not even just talking about what would be agreed upon social taxation to keep things up and running, but it's the idea that they can just gamble away the entire social security deposits. Like they can just gamble that away in the stock market and loan it to people and steal it and take it. Like anything that the government does with our tax money is never our choice. They have the option to change the taxes at will. And beyond that, there's the inflation of the dollar, which is a silent tax. You are taxing every business and every citizen in your country when you devalue and debase the dollar, because you are literally taking money at our expense. We go to the pump, we spend more money. We go to the
You're
grocery,
recapturing purchase power. You still have
right.
the same number of monies, but they're going to buy you half.
When the Fed manipulates the interest rate, it doesn't even apply to the consumer except in what you buy. You don't touch that interest rate because you're not of the business class. That business class is for the people who can actually afford to borrow and loan real money. And
And circling back to landowners, even if you're participating as a landowner, you never really own the land. You're paying property taxes on it forever. And maybe they want to build a highway there. And eminent domain says, we get your house now. We want a highway. Even if you own it, it could still not be yours if we want it.
yeah, I mean, pretty much, like, there's not much the government can't do to you. And government, as I keep pointing out, is an extension of corporations, is an extension of the business, mercantile, corporate class. It disguises itself as your savior, but it's in actuality just the other hand of the corporation.
And has a monopoly on enforcement of whatever they please and
Right.
whatever they're paid to enforce.
So yeah, in a lot of ways, it's such a charade to see the struggles of, like, Congress, for instance, is the one that always ends up taking on, like, TikTok and Facebook and different entities, right? It's usually Congress that they have to go before. So Congress is invested in these things. You know what I mean? Like, it's always a congressional hearing, and it's basically people who either hold stock in the thing or hold the other stock. Like, so there's
And
probably
if
a
they're
lot
not
of,
one of those, they're going to switch after the meeting to make sure they're on the right side.
oh yeah, and they already bought in another wallet.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, that's what it is too. Is they don't always make the moves themselves. It's their family doing it. Their husband will do it. Their wife will do it. Their brother or their
Nancy Pelosi.
cousin. Yeah, and I mean, that's a good thing to bring up too. Is like with Pelosi and Maxine Waters and Elizabeth Warren. You know what? Fuck it. We're gonna start saying names and curse words too. Fuck it. Like, it's all out. Let them shadow ban us. But, like, these are people who are adamantly anti-crypto and have created crypto disinformation and come after this industry, and it's because it goes against their power, it goes against the things they're already trying to do. But more importantly, like, they probably are well invested in these things somewhere else. We don't know if they hold crypto because they could hold it 100% anonymously. Like, we know they're
They don't even
corrupt
have to.
people.
They could hold bank stocks instead. And
What
of
do you
course they're
mean?
going to fight crypto. They don't
Well,
have to
yeah,
hold
yeah.
crypto to want to
No, they
like.
own both. What I'm saying is, it's like I said in a past episode, like, if you're an individual investor, then it actually pays, even if you are, you know, somebody who works for JP Morgan Chase, one of the CEOs or whatever, even if you're BlackRock or whatever, like, and as a government official, you're an investor. So you're going to invest what you think is in a good idea, even if it does go against your other bags. Because if you're like, wait, the banking industry's been doing bad for 30 years and here's a life raft. Well, I'm not going to go talk down the banking industry because I still work here and I still hold all kinds of power. And I'm not going to literally shoot my own ship down, but I'll definitely buy some Bitcoin. I'll definitely buy some
Definitely going to
Ethereum.
invest in a life raft.
And I'm definitely going to also go in the news and tell you I'm not doing it. You know what I
So when I do
mean?
that, I can buy more cheaper next week.
Because it is a diversification in the future. It is something to be like, hey, you know what? I may miss this thing, and it doesn't really cost much to like put your foot in that boat while still trying to harpoon it. Like, even if you lose that bag, and if you bought in early enough, you don't lose that bag because Bitcoin is up so high that like the chances of it going to zero, you know what I
It
mean?
would
The
have to
chances
be a
of it.
technical failure. It would have to be like the protocol fails. There's no chance it socially goes to zero just by narrative.
And I mean, I even think the same thing about Ethereum. Like, to some degree, I think there's too many projects built on the EVM for it to run too far down. I'm not saying it couldn't hit $80 again, but it could never hit zero again. You know? um, but I just think it this new system is it as an individual, you can't deny where things are going. It would be not in your best interest. And think I've thought about this before with like say with the founding of the United States. Like there was a time in this early stages of trying to secede from the British Empire where you had to have a deep philosophical conversation with yourself on whether or not, if you're a rich business owner who was involved in these conversations, not just you as an individual, let's just get that clear. But if you were one of these Thomas Jeffersons or whoever, that Washington and the rest that were allowed in the room to have the conversation, even before those conversations, there were other conversations, and there were people who didn't want to leave the British Empire. There was a point where you had to think about your bags and go, wait, all my money is in pounds. Like, if I don't keep investing in pounds, which means investing in the crown, what happens after that? And that's the scary part, is because what happens after that is you get your own country full of citizens to do what you want with, just like George did. Or whoever. Was that the king at the time? Was it a George? I feel like one of us needs to Google this so we don't look like complete idiots on this episode. But no, like the point being that like you as a person who's in the US or pre-US, you're in the colonies, you have to decide, hey, you know what? Like all of my investments in the pound and the crown don't mean anything to me. I'm worried about going west. I'm worried about this new land. And that means I got to get rid of y'all off my back, taking 30% all the time. And that's how the US came to be. At least that's the mythology of it.
We were so mad about 30% that we decided to go solo and do it 35%.
Or what it was. Yeah, exactly. But but it's worked out over time. If you look at how it's worked for the business class, the US has been up only for most of the business class. You know what I mean? generational wealth has been built in this country for the people who've had control for hundreds of years. Those of us who just happen to live here, not so much. We're the ones getting preyed upon. And we're the ones being taught an ideology that tells us to allow ourselves to be preyed upon because it's the American way. And somehow being preyed upon will get you the American dream.
But you still have to keep trying because you won't get rich unless you keep trying.
And if you want to change, well, you're going to have to vote. What? Like it's very corrupt. And so like I see crypto as, in Bankless we talk about going west, and that is what's really happening here is, yeah, it's risky to buy Bitcoin and Ethereum and any cryptocurrency, but you are taking a chance that this is a new financial market that will replace the old fiat financial market. And in doing so, also break us free of government corruption and corporate corruption in the form of smart contracts. Because I would say Bitcoin certainly takes on the money and the commodity in a hard way. But Ethereum brings forth all of the technology that gives us financial tools that allow us to use internet money in ways that only banks and markets allowed possible.
And I would even argue that it's more than just a financial tool. It's more than just a shift in money system. This is a complete reorganization of our collaboration and coordination. Like you
Right.
said, not only are you, exiting the fiat system into dollars, or from dollars, but you're also realigning with self-sovereignty. And, if we're going to be looking at the future using this technology, maybe governments are DAOs. Maybe the DAO structure or something similar to it is really what is ideal now, given our ability to communicate, collaborate, constant connection, all the information at our fingertips with GPT and AI and automation.
And with all of that, cryptography is important at the individual level in being able to hold your own data and be in control of what happens with your information, your algorithms, and all these things. It's like, you're
Privacy,
right.
your own identity, even.
It's not just financial because, yeah, while the money is bad and the money is corrupt and the government is built on that corrupt system, we're also living in a new digital age where a lot of like that hasn't even been considered in. There is no governance over your humanity on the internet. There's literally just terms of service, and those terms of service are techno feudalism.
Siloed corporate protection bubbles. Yeah.
And so, like, what we're going into is we're coming from a very corrupt fiat system onto an internet of literal serfdom where you do what we say or we will not allow you to use our platforms. Oh, and by the way, we control all of your data and your content. Oh, you're just content now. Oh, you thought you were an artist?
Your content.
Your content, yeah. You
Yeah.
thought you were an artist? You thought you were a musician? No, you are content. You're not a podcast. Your cat is now digitally ours. You're and yeah, exactly. You're filler between ads. Thank you for your service, citizen.
Thanks for your eyeballs.
Here's some McDonald's. And some medicine to go with it.
Yeah. Gonna need this.
Oh, I think that is a great way to kind of start wrapping this series because this is our last actual subject. We're going to do a
Last
recap and a
trap we're covering
retro.
it.
But yeah, this is our last trap. And I think that is a good way to tie it all together is just like, the health, the education. It's all, we talked about a lot of the other traps, like how it's all a race to the bottom. And I think we've pointed out pretty thoroughly how every layer of the system is corrupt.
Yeah.
And
We're not here just to complain about stuff. We're here to identify these issues and almost advertise for, hey, Web3 has some solutions here. We're looking for that way to improve that next level up in our coordination.
yeah, and the thing I do worry about with crypto and on-chain life is that we have a lot of the same types of personalities going in there as thought leaders. The next generation of aristocracy, the technocracy, if you will have all of these like keys to the internet and this power over digital currencies and the power over the places that you mint NFTs and do swaps and all of these other DeFi tools that we need. And you just have a new ruling class of people who are self-interested, and that's why it's important to make sure that the actual protocols and the systems that we're tapping into are credibly neutral as much as possible or values aligned as much as possible. Thinking about governance capture, thinking about how easy it is for someone to corrupt the entire system of money or how easy it is to ruin a financial protocol. Um, Whatever it might be, like this is why this stuff is important because we don't get that new future by just pretending that like Pepe cares about you.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yep. It can't be surface level. It can't be superficial. The system is so wrecked that in order to get that future we want, we have to change the whole system.
Right. And you can't have a skeuomorphic cryptographic future. If the new on chain Web3 future is built off of all the same models of success of what the last corporate future was based on, then like over time, it doesn't matter if it's Bitcoin or Ethereum or any other chain, it's just going to steer towards the protocol winning and the citizens losing.
It'll be the same model. Yeah.
And that's why token weighted voting is so dangerous because what token weighted voting is shareholder voting. So if we go to a future of DAO governance, token weighted voting is terrible.
Yeah, you a
Like,
landowner or not? How big's your land? Does it matter?
right.
That's token weighted voting. We don't want to start this shit all over again.
And that's essentially what a lot of crypto is skeuomorphic and we that's part of the reason we do what we do because we want to preach values in crypto. We want, like people to see why this is important because it's not just to make money and just to hold more power in a new
There you go.
system. It is to have a new system where things are better for everyone and not this survival of the fittest race to the bottom. And I think that's where Moloch traps has been important in crypto before, but I think that in bull markets, these kinds of values are forgotten because you're not thinking about Moloch when you're thinking about your bags, because your bag is Moloch talking.
You're creating Moloch in that instance. When you're optimizing for your own bags, you're fueling and feeding Moloch, whether you like it or intend to or not. That is just how Moloch happens to exist.
And I think this is why tribalism happens because not only do you have the need to defend your bags from other bags and bag holders, but you have a need to validate your system as better than every other system because and
That's how you get nationalism.
well, it's also cultish because you can't even be critical of your bags. If you want to go into a DAO that you're a part of and be critical of the governance, well, you're not helping. You're not being part of you can't really criticize things. And we've been in communities where, like, yeah, like criticizing things was actually you were attacked by the community. People were so invested in this thing that any speaking out about it villainized you and turned you into a bad person, not just like able to honestly discuss what this project is up to. Because
Typically, that came back later as a, oh, shoot, you were right. But in the moment, yeah, you certainly get a lot of it.
and it's because the thing is, it doesn't matter. Like a project not being a scam is like the first level of it. Like, okay, so you're not a scam. It doesn't mean it's not a cash grab. It doesn't mean that it's not vulnerable, and it doesn't mean that it doesn't have that the values of the project are actually misleading and they're not the same values I bought into.
It also doesn't mean that the community or the token holders that end up participating in that community are also aligned. You could
Right.
have a perfect project, perfect values alignment, everything's tied up tight and looking nice. But if a group of bad actors comes in and there is an opportunity to exploit this system for their own personal gain, it will be exploited.
That's interesting. No, you're absolutely right. It's not, I don't even think it's just that. yes, people will always try to exploit things for their personal gain, but I like where you were going with another. It's almost like you don't know what community is going to end up being the loudest and the most prominent community. And we don't know, for instance, let's look at Bitcoin. Like, I think Bitcoin is seen as a maximalist, liberal, like very liberal, libertarian type of tribe, and very like not caring about public goods. It's all about the market. Let the market decide everything. Very like hyper libertarian. And I think Ethereum exists in this place where it's like, well, why don't we make things more equitable? Why don't we try to create a better world where more people are allowed to participate? And it's not just about like, I think it's Vitalik is very like into quadratic voting and not token weighted voting and things like that. So like civil resistance, like Gitcoin, Kevin Owocki, Vitalik, and a lot of people like that are very aligned towards that type of goal. And I think there's a lot of projects built on the EVM that aren't values aligned with that initial thing. And that is fine because that's what an open market is. You don't make everyone participate. And I mean, optimism as a chain is about public goods. That is a community you go to if you're about public goods. And I think that that's kind of why we're seeing a large migration towards that, because overall, I think Ethereum is built on more open values of allowing the entire world to participate.
It's more values and the tool set's more broad, so you can do more with it. With
Right.
Bitcoin, it's just transfer of value, but with Ethereum and the programmable smart contracts and this understanding that there's a community, I think it incorporates the human nature more, maybe better than the Bitcoin system does.
Right. Yeah, and exactly. That's what I was trying to say. You expressed it perfectly. Exactly. That's so I think overall like it's important for shows like this. It's important for everybody who's actually focused on the future, not just based on our bags and not just based on our investment strategies, but based on like what gives us an honest chance at a better future
Bingo.
for everybody, not just for me.
Right? Yeah, my bags go up and down. That's great. Sure, I like to pump my bags. Great. But it is about the end goal of better future for everyone. Like what is the better trajectory for our civilization to be on?
Absolutely. So I think that has been the point of our series, and we're definitely going to be back with our recap and our retro on the entire series, a deeper dive into specificities of things, and really just like I think this was a great thing to end on government corruption. It ties into it all, and can't wait to be back with the final recap.
Yes.
All right. Thanks for watching today's episode of Moloch Traps, Government Corruption and Congress. We hope you enjoy this series. As always, none of what we say is legal or financial advice, and we encourage listeners to do their own research in these areas before making any related decisions. If you find our content informational, educational, and entertaining and would like to support us, please collect these episodes on tape.xyz. 18% of proceeds goes to BanklessDAO, 2% supports Tape for hosting our videos, and the rest helps to make From A to Z Productions possible. To stay on top of our weekly series, subscribe to us on the BanklessDAO YouTube, and don't forget to like and comment while you're there. We will see you next time, friends.